Hey there, my name is Matt. I'm a full-time clothing seller on eBay. I've done a little bit of Poshmark in the past, and this is my beginner's tutorial video on how to get eBay clothing photography or just online retail clothing photography under control, because if you've spent any time trying to troubleshoot the photography process for product photos in general, and especially for clothing photography, you will have discovered that nothing works quite as it should, and photos tend to end up looking bad. And it's taken me a very long time to come to a point where my photo setup is good enough to produce decent photos consistently that don't have to be edited in a third-party app or really have to be tampered with at all. I can just shoot them, put them up on eBay on a listing without any further editing for the most part, and they will look pretty good. And that's the point of this tutorial, is to get you to that point. I am not a photo expert. There are many people who are better at product photography than I am. Believe me, I go through other sellers' eBay stores sometimes trying to get ideas, and there's lots of people who take much better photos than me. This is my guide on how to get like consistently 7 out of 10 quality photos without spending a lot of money to do it, get you off the ground, and maybe if you seek more advanced advice, you can find it, implement it, it'll work, and if it does, come back here and lead me by the hand. Something to keep in mind with all of the advice that I'm giving here is that there are plenty of people who take awful photos of their stuff and they still sell just fine, because the level of expectation on eBay is much lower than somewhere like Amazon, where the bedroom seller, we are here literally in a stuffed bedroom, it's pretty messy. I am a bedroom seller. People expect that from eBay, and any advantage, any increase in quality in your photos that you can give yourself is added value on top of that. That's my philosophy. So you can get away with a lot. So if you have gray, blurry, bad photos of the right product, it will still sell on eBay. Lighting is probably the most important thing, and that's the thing that you're going to want to definitely get a handle on or invest a little bit of money in. My understanding is that natural light, meaning sunlight, is by far the best light source, especially for the amateur photographer. And I've generally found that to be the case. I've not lived in places where I had abundant natural light, despite living in California. But if you have a place where you can get direct sunlight on your products, just go with direct sunlight, because the color matching is going to be superior. Color matching meaning, depending on the temperature of your lighting, meaning the actual color of the light being emitted, and the quality of your camera, colors often will end up looking different than how you see them with your naked eye. By the time they're processed through the camera and put up on the internet, it can actually cause problems. So sunlight is the best for that. Sunlight is the spectrum of light on which all of our eyeballs operate, and it gives the best quality photos. Typically, overcast days, like today, I think it's a little overcast, are better. Okay, so if you don't have access to natural light, or you want to be able to list at night, which I think is really an advantage, it behooves you to get a really basic lighting rig, and you don't need to overdo it, you don't need to overthink it like I did, which I'll talk about in a second. All you really need, we're going shaky cam here, all you need is one of these really basic box light setups that you can get off Amazon. I think these are Neweer. All of these lights, the branding is not really important. I think they all come from the same factories in China. I think these are an Alibaba product, but you can get them on Amazon. Just get the big box light, and I'll show you why these are good. Take this off here. They typically come in a set of 2, and it's just a gigantic, compact, fluorescent light bulb. It puts out a lot of light. So get you a pair of these. Previously, I was also using those in conjunction with a ring light, but I've discovered fairly recently that that actually is not necessary and makes the quality of the photos worse, which I'll talk about. So, get these lights. They're a good investment. They're not that expensive. They're around 50, 60 bucks. That's what I paid for these. There are not going to be any affiliate links in the description. I apologize. Just go on Amazon and figure it out. And in terms of a background, well, let's talk about, do you want to do a flat lay? Do you want to do a hanger like this? Do you want to do a mannequin? I think if you're selling, if you have experience in selling and you're selling something really specific, it makes sense to maybe do a mannequin, although despite a lot of people's opinions, I think mannequin photos typically actually don't look quite as good as just a hanger photo or a flat lay. There are exceptions. I think women's clothing can benefit quite a lot from a mannequin just because it's a world of chaos in women's clothing, and garments can be cut in really outlandish and specific ways that don't translate visually. If you're just doing something like this, they just kind of look messy, whereas if it was on a mannequin, you could see where all of the cuts and etc. lay. So if you're doing a lot of women's tops, consider doing a mannequin. Otherwise, I think flat laying or doing the hanger are the way to go. Flat laying, in my opinion, actually looks the best of any clothing photo format, and it gets poo-pooed a little bit because it's the beginner format, it's what everybody does. But when you can lay a garment flat out and show its exact contours, its shape, and you make it look really neat and tidy, they're easy to light, and I think they look best. They give you the most accurate representation, at least in terms of the kind of stuff that I sell, which is, again, is mostly not women's stuff. I think flat laying looks the best. However, when you flat lay, little gremlins come out and stab you in the back with knives the whole time you're doing it. It's really not good for your back, and you're gonna wind up in agony like I did. Probably, unless you're a gymnast or a postural expert or you figure something out, but I hate doing it because even though it's much easier and it looks better, it's just killer on your back to be hunched over like this. I've never figured out a way around it, which is why I do this setup. And let me show you here. It's very simple, and this is accessible to anyone and everyone. It's just a hanger on the wall. Knock my lights over. That's all it is. It's just a hanger that I have. You can see it here. I have a picture frame hanger. It's a nail that goes into the wall at an angle, and it has this hook here. And it's not a perfect system. You can't put a ton of weight on that, and eventually after you use it a little while, this nail tends to kind of come loose and you have to pop it back in. But for general purposes, this is great. This is totally satisfactory. I used to just do a straight nail in the wall, but I prefer this. I think it's a little bit gentler on the wall and can hold a little more weight. And I just use a standard hanger. It's good to use a hanger actually that doesn't have this bottom bar, but I have lost the one that I had. The reason for that is when you hang a shirt or a jacket, the brand tag will be right in the middle here, and it's good just to have an unimpeded view of that, so you can just go in and take a photo. In terms of a backdrop, eBay apparently, technically, I always hear this, quote unquote, wants sellers to use a white background because that is a requirement of the Google shopping algorithm to include products in Google shopping. I don't know that that really dramatically impacts your sales as a small seller. In my opinion, this could be the wrong opinion, but this is how I operate. It's more important that the majority of my photos look good inside the listing than that I comply with a white background, quote unquote, requirement. Also because I list on a desktop and I don't list on my phone, and they don't have the auto white background feature. If you're listing on your phone, this will still work. If you want to have your first photo as a white background, eBay now has built-in functionality on the eBay phone app when you're listing that will populate the background as pure white. which actually ends up looking better than most people's white background. And that's why I use this kind of wood pattern background. This is a fabric, it's like a thin felt fabric. Got it off Amazon, it costs like 30 bucks, and this prevents your photos. I'll put it this way, this forgives a lot of mistakes when you're taking clothing photos. If you're just doing a white background, 9 times out of 10, the background is just gonna be gray. It's gonna look weird and bad and amateurish, and again, those aren't deal breakers. You'll still sell your stuff, but the fantasy of being able to just have a white background and have it come through as vivid white in your photos is not gonna happen. It's gonna look bad, and all you have to do is try that out yourself a few times or go online and look at people's listings and you'll see what I mean. It just ends up looking gray and shadowy and bad. This background absorbs that, especially if you get the lighting set up properly, which I'll show you. It doesn't create these weird shadows, and it creates a little bit of contrast with the piece of clothing that you're photographing, and you don't have to go in and adjust brightness and contrast on every single photo to make it look good. It's hard to put into words. It just ends up looking consistently a little bit better this way. And I know that this is being frowned upon now, but it's a night and day difference to me. I think it makes a big difference over the long run. And if you're doing clothing reselling on any level except just as like a really limited part-time side gig, any little advantage that you can give yourself like this that will allow you to work volume more easily is going to be worth it. I take literally thousands of photos against this thing. For the most part, I'm not gonna invest the time to go in and make these photo adjustments. I don't put them through Photoshop. Most of the time with my current setup, I don't even adjust the built-in toggles for brightness and contrast on the eBay listing page. I just want to be able to take a photo and move on. So maybe I spent a little too much time explaining that, but let me show you this too. So I've got this one, which is below eye level, and this is where I do most of my photography here. So I do a lot of shirts and jackets and stuff like that. So they live there, and I'm able to come back here and hold the phone. I take photos on the phone. That's a little spoiler for later in the video. I hold the phone at about chest level right here, close to my body, and I'm able to get the garment in frame that way because it's fairly low down. If you put it up higher, you're gonna have to lift your arms up like this to take the photos. And cumulatively over time, this is not good. I have developed shoulder pain from sourcing and from taking photos with your arms extended for long periods of time like this over and over again. You can get repetitive strain injuries. So you want it lower down so you can just take photos like this and still have them look decent. But sometimes, if you look down here at my messy floor, this is not good for pants, dresses, long jackets, coats, etc. So I have another one of these set up here, up higher, so that when I do want to do pants, and it's a different kind of hanger that I use for pants, I can hang it up higher, and there's more space. I do it in rectangle view instead of square view, which I'll show you in a bit. Okay, so that's my backdrop. You can attach this to the wall with nails. I use little picture frame nails, just little tiny guys, or masking tape or whatever. It's not hard to do. Let's talk about choice of camera. So this is a much simpler problem to solve than you would think. You don't need to do a ton of comparison shopping or pulling out of your hair trying to figure out what the best solution is. Here it is, get a nice phone. That's it. For a long time, I was trying to go this route, the DSLR route, because in my mind, the assumption is, like I'm sure it is for a lot of you, that something that looks like this probably takes higher quality photos than something that looks like this. And that is, in my experience, not the case. Don't get too big for your britches. My britches, when it comes to photography, are quite small, and this fits in them nicely, literally. So, why a phone? The DSLRs are good, I think, if you are going to invest the time to do it in manual mode, learn all of the settings, ISO, shutter speed, etc., and tinker with it as you go and take more time to take your photos. As I've discussed, I think that the benefits of doing that are outweighed by the amount of time that you have to sink into making it work, especially when you're selling stuff for like 10, 20 bucks, which is a lot of my business model. So the phone is the right answer. And there's a middle ground there, which is cameras like the one that I'm filming on, which you can't see. It's the Canon G7X. It's a more advanced point and shoot with a lens that pops out. And it's a great camera, and I got it for the sake of simplicity, actually not to use it as a vlogging camera, but that's ended up being its purpose because it got a piece of dust trapped in the lens, and that little tiny mote of matter became a giant liability in my photos. I couldn't take photos of anything navy blue or black because there would be this big energy orb right in the middle of the photos, and that's apparently a problem that's pretty common with any point and shoot camera, where the lens has a motor that makes it extend in and out like that. So I've had to find a different use for it. The phone. Even a phone that's a few years old will take more better photos more consistently and more easily than if you were using a DSLR camera. That's because there have been millions and millions and millions of dollars of R&D money put into making these as user-friendly as possible. And this is Galaxy, what is it, Galaxy 9 Plus, Samsung? I'm not a gearhead, I don't really know. Basically any phone that's a couple years old or newer is gonna take phenomenal photos. I think everything from basically the iPhone 8 up is suitable. I use a Samsung. I got an iPhone 11X Pro, or the 11 Pro, because it was supposed to have the most sophisticated phone camera on the market. It cost like $1,000. Used it for a while and took it back and traded it. Well, I exchanged it. I got a refund for that, and then I bought this for like 700 bucks, and it takes better photos than the iPhone. Again, I'm not a photography expert. I don't know all the specs and all that, but I don't think it's terribly important. So with this, you can run it on auto. It takes care of all the settings for you. You just point and shoot, and it looks consistently really good. It's gonna give you that consistent 7 out of 10 without having to put any more time into it. Excuse me. When going like that with your phone. That's it. So, one of the downsides of the Samsung phone is that it lacks the functionality that Apple phones do of being able to just tap the screen and adjust the brightness on the phone itself. It hasn't been a serious problem, but in retrospect, maybe I would consider getting like an iPhone 8 or something like that, something with a decent quality camera where you can just adjust the brightness on the go. It's not a giant time commitment, but by the same token, you can do the same basic thing in the eBay listing functionality. It has toggles for brightness and contrast. And also, you can get third-party apps, and I have one called PicTapGo that I'll show you at the end for if you want to do a little bit of touch-up in terms of brightness and contrast on more expensive stuff that's worth the time. I'll show you how I do that. So let's talk about how to get this all set up so you can actually take photos. Step one is A, make sure that the box lights that you get come with these diffuser screens. Because if you can see, I showed you this before. This is gonna fall on top of me. But if you can see in here, this is just reflective, and this creates a really, really harsh light that casts a lot of shadows on your products when you use it. So use these diffuser screens. I used these lights for like half a year before I figured that out. It's been a very slow learning curve for Matty Boy. And like I said, the ring light ends up being overkill. If you're getting dim photos, my assumption for the longest time was that it was a deficit of light. Because when you get these set up and you turn them on, the effect to the naked eye is not that impressive. I mean, it's coming through on the camera because that's what the camera does, but when you look at this, it looks kind of dim. It's not that impressive. And so I was getting like kind of dim, shadowy photos with some bad color matching, etc. I assumed the problem was there's just not enough light at play. So I got this and set it up, and I would set it up so that these box lights were jammed as close up as possible to the clothing with the, so I had the box lights on each side right up in the grill of the clothes, and then I had the ring light in the middle turned to full brightness, so it was just getting blasted with light. And I didn't consider the fact that when you do that, and if you're using the automatic setting on your phone, the aperture will naturally adjust to the level of light, and it just completely defeats itself. Also, if you use more than one kind of light source, there's going to be a mismatch in terms of the temperature of the light. So that actually becomes a real problem. It makes the photos look weird. If the hue of the light is even slightly different from light to light, it'll just end up looking weird, and something just doesn't quite look right to the eye. So just use the ones that come together. All right. So how to actually properly set these lights up. Let's see if I can give you enough perspective here. What I do is I have one light that will be up high, pointing down, and I'll have the second light lower down, pointing up. And that prevents a whole lot of shadows being formed. It creates a more even lay of the light on the product. Ends up looking better. If you just do it from the sides, the top and bottom of the photo will be darker than the middle. Or if you do them both from the top or both from the bottom, obviously it's going to look like a spooky campfire story, or it's going to look like it's being interrogated. So the way that I get these set up to begin with, before I take any photos, is I will look here. It's going to be a little tricky just with this one camera, but I want this area to be perfectly lit because this is going to be for a shirt. So I'm going to take this top light, the big one, and I'm going to set it pretty far back. To set it back, you can see how actually far this is away. I don't know if you can get a great sense of scale here, but it is. It's pretty far. It's relatively far back in the room. And I'll talk about why that is important. And I'm going to adjust it so that it's covering, so that the light is hitting the brightest part of the light is focused on that middle area right there. And when you bring it far back, it doesn't make a huge difference, but I like to make sure that it's actually a little bit focused. Then I will turn that off, and I'll do the other light in the same way. My room is messy. So then I'll take this one, put it pretty far back here, hold on. Let me just get this, I'm gonna get this set up and then I'll show you because this is too difficult. Okay, so you can see this is much lower down than that one is. So the light's coming in from different angles, and this is lighting up pretty much that whole range right there, the middle range. So I'm not gonna move those lights now. Turn them both on, and now there's just a nice, even dispersal of diffuse light. And again, you're not trying to spotlight this. You're not trying to maximize the amount of light that's getting here to the point where it's blindingly bright. You're just trying to kind of bathe the product in adequate light to where the phone will be able to render a bright enough picture. I kind of think of it like almost like a sprinkler system. It needs to be a fine mist of light instead of a jet of light that's coming here. So some YouTube channels will recommend using one of these. It's a modified hanger that is much longer. It allows you to mimic the look of a flat lay, where you can fold the sleeves over on themselves. I have found this to not be really worth the extra hassle. It takes longer to put the stuff on. If the shirt is not the right size, if it's too big, especially if it's like a t-shirt or something, it can just end up looking weird. Or if it's too short, it'll just be the cuffs that are flipped down on the end. It looks bizarre. So you have to have basically the perfect size of shirt for this to look good. And most people are gonna be totally fine with just seeing a t-shirt on a hanger. This is so much faster, simpler, more elegant in my experience, or in my opinion rather. So I just use the hanger. One really important note for taking eBay photos is make sure that whatever camera you're using, be it a phone or a DSLR, can take photos in 1:1 aspect ratio or square mode. I think that's actually what Apple calls it. What that does, the importance of that is the eBay photos display as 1:1 aspect ratio. So if you take it in 4:3 or any other aspect ratio, there's going to be dead space when eBay uploads the photo because it's going to be fitted into a 1:1 aspect ratio template. And you want that full space to be full. So on my phone it's pretty simple, and I do this for 95% of my photos with a couple of exceptions that I'll talk about. Go into picture size, it says 1:1, you can just toggle between 4:3. Trying to get my camera to focus on this close-up is going to be a nightmare. So I'll just say 1:1. It's pretty simple. I think all modern phones have the square mode feature. And the exception to that is if the garment is so long that when I pull back in square mode, I get to the edge of this canvas here. You can see the edge, then I'll go into 4:3 aspect ratio, the vertical picture, and I'll upload that, and there will be some dead space in the photo, but that's fine because it ends up an aggregate looking better than if it was in square mode. But for most of the time, be sure that you're taking square photos. I want to make one more recommendation here if you're indeed using a phone. If you see right here, so right here, that 2x button, I can just click that and see what happened. You can see here, it zooms in twice as far. I cannot tell you how useful that is to have, and I think iPhones have it too. If you can get a camera with that function, it makes it much easier. You can take close-up photos or photos of the tag, and when it's zoomed in like that, the field of view is flatter. I don't know the proper whatever terminology, photography terms, but it just looks so professional. Okay, so I'm gonna take a full series of photos here. I'm just gonna maybe time-lapse it, maybe not. I'm just gonna show you exactly how long it actually takes me to take a full set of photos, and then I'll show you the quality without any doctoring at all. Alright, so that was about 10 photos, including close-ups of the tags and close-ups of a flaw with a collar. And I'll show you how it actually looks. So there's a couple of stipulations, there's a couple of scenarios where this bare bones approach is not going to serve you perfectly. Those are taking photos of really, really light or bright colored garments can be tricky. And two, if you actually want to go slower, if you have something that's worth a couple $100 or, you know, is more specialized in some way, you really want to make sure that the photo quality is maxed out. It does behoove you to go in and use some kind of either photo editing software or an app on your phone. So in terms of the first scenario, like I was taking a photo of this bright neon chartreuse shirt, and because it reflects light, more light enters the lens of the camera and the camera adjusts the aperture and lets less light in. This is my bro science rendition of it in my own brain. The quality, the brightness level of the photo drops, so it ends up looking drab and gray and dark. And when that happens, it's nice to have a Samsung phone because it has the functionality of going into what's called Pro mode, which actually lets you manually adjust ISO and the shutter speed. So you can go in and go much more slowly and tinker with it that way until the photos actually look good. I will say if you go in close up, you have to, you know, tinker as you go. And this is true of, you know, auto as well, or just something to keep in mind. When you get closer to the garment to take photos, especially the tags, etc., there's less ambient light in the field of view, so the photos are going to be a little bit darker. Just kind of goes with the territory. It's not a big deal. I'm willing to roll with it. If you don't know ISO, shutter speed, I'm not going to go into it on this video. One, because I don't know it well enough to rattle it off the top of my head in a way that would be useful. And two, you can just kind of play around with it, figure it out when you use a phone. So the other case, let's say I take a photo here. Let's say that this shirt was worth whatever, $500. I could import it into Photoshop, or I could use an app called PicTapGo that I hope I still have installed here. Okay, so I've loaded that photo up on the PicTapGo app. You can just click to edit and just slide like this up and down. And this looks to the naked eye exactly like the eBay, the built-in brightness and contrast function. But the eBay, it's really low fidelity. It creates a lot of noise in the photo and it's not that good. So if you really want to make it look more decent, this actually produces a much higher quality image. And if you are really persnickety and you feel the need to make all of your photos look as good as possible all the time, this is still relatively quick. So you just toggle it like that. It's the goodness to badness toggle. And you up it in goodness until it looks about right, and then you can just save it to your phone or export it or do whatever. So I'll do that if I'm, again, if it's something really valuable, or if I just ended up taking really bad photos of something, or I can't figure it out in Pro mode, etc. It's nice to have that. It costs about $3. I'm not at all being paid to shill for this. It's just something that I use. I think there are free alternatives as well, but I'm not familiar with them. So that's it. So that's really all you need. You need a backdrop. I like the wooden one. I also will say I like the kind of neutral colored wood backdrop. I think it contrasts okay with everything. I believe lighter clothes probably end up looking a little bit better if you have a darker backdrop, but that's speculation on my part. But it works out for me. You need a backdrop, you need the 2 box lights with the diffusers, you need a good camera phone, hanger, put the lights far back, a big, you know, sweep of diffuse light on your photos, and just move quick and do adjustments as you go. That's really the nutshell. And this allows you to work a huge amount of volume. You can bang out these photos really, really quick. That's my photo setup tutorial. That's how I'm taking photos right now. And I hope it helps. So thanks for watching.